It was the kind of winter that buried the world in silence. Snow had fallen for 3 days straight, leaving behind a thick white blanket over everything. Far away from the noise of towns and the buzz of city life, there stood a small wooden cabin deep in the forest. It was old but solid, with a chimney that puffed out little clouds of smoke and windows that looked out onto endless trees. A man, tired, heartbroken, and needing to be alone, had chosen that cabin as a place to disappear for a while. After a hard breakup, he'd wanted nothing more than to escape people, noise, and his thoughts. The cabin seemed perfect. No neighbors. For miles. Just the sound of crackling fire, the crunch of boots on snow, and the occasional distant howl of wind. Days passed quietly. The man chopped wood, made warm meals, read old books, and watched the snow pile higher outside his door. The stillness of the place felt peaceful, even healing. But as the nights grew colder and the forest darker, something began to feel off. On the fourth night, while drinking hot tea by the fire, he heard a sound outside, soft and slow. It was the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on fresh snow. He paused, holding his breath, listening. The footsteps stopped. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain back gently. Nothing. Just snow, shadows, and trees. No animal tracks, no sign of life. He told himself it was probably just a deer or maybe the trees groaning in the cold. But the next night, the same sound returned. This time, it was louder, closer. He waited by the window, eyes scanning the eye. White landscape. Again, nothing appeared. Still, a heavy feeling settled over the cabin, like he was being watched. The wind outside howled low, almost like a whisper. He shook off the feeling and went to bed, leaving a single lamp burning. But something deep inside had begun to stir, a quiet warning, like his instincts trying to scream through the silence. Something wasn't right in that forest, and the strange noises outside were just the beginning. The real terror hadn't even started yet. Morning came with a pale, cold sun rising behind the trees, casting long shadows across the snow. The man, wrapped in layers and still tired from a restless night, stepped outside to gather firewood. As his boots crunched on the fresh snow, he noticed something unusual near the front of the cabin. There, pressed deep into the untouched whiteness, were a series of footprints. They were human, clear, sharp impressions of boots, not animal tracks. They led from the edge of the woods directly to his front steps. But what made his blood run cold was the fact that there were no footprints going back. Whoever had made them had approached the cabin and never left. He stood frozen, staring at them, trying to make sense of it. The snow had fallen evenly all night. If someone had walked away, there would have been signs, disturbed snow, another set of tracks. But there was nothing. Just one path. One way. In? It didn't make sense. A prank? Someone wandering through the forest? But that didn't explain the silence. No knocks, no calls, no sign of movement. And the night before, the cabin had remained locked. Every window shut. Every door bolted. He remembered checking them twice. Still, a feeling of unease began to grow inside him, curling around his chest like a cold hand. Trying to dismiss it, he returned inside, made coffee, and told himself it was probably an old trail that had become visible again. But the prints were too fresh, too perfect. That afternoon passed slowly. The wind outside picked up, whistling through the trees and brushing snow off the high branches. Every now and then, he would glance out the window, eyes drawn back to those footprints, still there, like a message half written in the snow. That evening, before the sun dipped too low, he made a decision. He set up a simple trap using fishing, wire and a bell he found in a drawer. The wire stretched low across the porch, just enough that anyone walking near the door would trip it and ring the bell. It was a quiet plan, born not from fear, but from the need for answers. Whether an animal, a lost hiker, or something stranger, he wanted to know what, or who, was coming to the cabin in the night. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, he built a strong fire and sat near it, listening. The cabin groaned in the cold, its wooden walls expanding and shrinking as the outside world froze solid. The snow outside glowed faintly in the moonlight. Hours passed. The bell remained silent, but even as he sat there, wrapped in warmth, a part of him stayed alert. Something was out there, watching, waiting. And deep down, some part of him already knew the bell would ring. It was only a matter of time. The night dragged on slowly, with the fire flickering low and the shadows in the cabin dancing like they had minds of their own. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional snap of burning wood or the wind brushing against the windows. Then, just after midnight, a sharp ting echoed through the cabin. The bell. It had rung. Not loud, but clear enough to slice through the stillness like a knife. Every muscle in the man's body tensed. He turned toward the door, heart pounding. Breath caught in his throat. There was no other sound, no footsteps, no knocking. Just that one bell chime, and then silence. Standing slowly, he picked up the flashlight and crept toward the front window. He pulled back the curtain an inch and peeked outside. The snow glowed under the pale moonlight, and for a moment, nothing seemed out of place. But then he saw it, just beyond the porch, standing at the edge of the trees. A figure. Tall, still, and completely silent. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, watching. No light reflected from its eyes, no breath steamed from its face. It was dressed in dark clothing, almost blending into the shadows, but its outline was clear against the white snow. A cold wave of fear crashed over him. Whoever, or whatever it was, hadn't tripped the wire by accident. It had done it on purpose. A warning, maybe. Or a message. He backed away from the window, locking the door again even though it had already been locked. The fire crackled behind him, casting warmth, but it no longer felt comforting. He stayed, up the rest of the night, watching the window, the door, the shadows on the walls. But the figure never approached. It just vanished sometime before dawn, leaving no more sound, no more signs. Morning light revealed a fresh snowfall had covered most of the tracks, but something still remained, just enough to confirm it hadn't been imagination. A single set of footprints once again led to the cabin, and again there were none going back. Tired, shaken, and desperate to understand what was happening, he searched the area, circling the cabin, looking for clues. But there was nothing. No tools, no dropped items, no sign of camp or shelter nearby. Just trees, silence, and a growing sense that the forest wasn't as empty as it looked. That afternoon, clouds rolled in fast, and a heavy snowstorm began. The wind screamed louder than before, and the trees swayed like they were trying to speak. He stayed inside, chopping extra wood, double-checking the locks, and making sure nothing was out of place. But something had changed. The cabin no longer felt like a safe hideaway. It felt like a trap. Something was playing a game, and it wasn't finished. Whatever had rung that bell had a reason, and it would come back. The storm didn't let up. For 2 days, snow fell like a curtain, thick and endless, wrapping the forest in white silence. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the world beyond the cabin turned into a swirling blur of white and gray. Inside, the man kept the fire burning strong, trying to push away the cold that now felt deeper than weather, like it had crawled into the very walls of the cabin. Food supplies were still fine, and water came from melted snow, but comfort had long vanished. Sleep became short and filled with strange dreams. Dreams of standing in the forest with someone whispering behind the trees, always just out of sight. On the third night of the storm, Just after the wind had briefly calmed, the man noticed something chilling. Near the edge of the fireplace, on the wooden floor just inside the cabin, there was a trail of melted snow, small, wet prints leading from the front door to the center of the room. But the door had not been opened. No windows were broken. Everything was exactly as it had been the night before. Yet the wet trail was there, clear as day, slowly drying in the warmth. The prints were human-shaped, but too small for boots and barefoot. He stared at them, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His breath caught as he followed the trail with his eyes. It led directly to the chair where he always sat by the fire. That same chair was damp, as if someone, or something, had been sitting in it. A cold sweat broke across his skin. Panic started to rise, but he forced himself to breathe, to think. He checked the locks again, all secure. He inspected every corner of the cabin, even the crawl space beneath the floor. Nothing. No signs of entry, yet the wet prints told a different story. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat awake with the flashlight in one hand and a fire poker, in the other, waiting, listening. Every creak, every groan of the wood sounded louder than before. And then, sometime past midnight, came the soft sound of breathing, steady, slow, and close. It wasn't his. It came from the darkness near the far end of the room, where the shadows were thickest. But when he pointed the flashlight in that direction, nothing was there. The sound stopped. The air felt colder, the silence heavier. And then, faintly, the bell on the porch rang again. Just once. Not a mistake. Not the wind. A single deliberate ring. A signal. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just sat there, staring at the door, heart beating like a drum. Whoever had been standing outside before had now been inside. And left without a sound. Or maybe they hadn't left at all. Maybe they were still there, hidden in the silence, waiting for the storm to end. Or worse, waiting for him to break. Morning arrived slowly, with a dull gray light that barely pushed through the frosted windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a heavy silence and a world buried under fresh snow. The man moved through the cabin like a ghost, drained from the long, sleepless night. Every corner he passed, every shadow he looked at, seemed to whisper with the memory of that faint breathing and the single ring of the bell. He kept the fire going and boiled water, his hands trembling slightly as he worked. The prints had vanished. By now, dried and gone, but the feeling they left behind had settled deep into the cabin's bones. Something had changed. The air felt wrong. The silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was watching, listening. Later that afternoon, while gathering wood near the shed behind the cabin, he noticed something strange poking out of the snow near the tree line, a small, dark shape. Curious but cautious, he brushed the snow away and revealed a bundle of cloth, weathered, frozen, and soaked through. Inside it, wrapped tightly like a forgotten offering, lay a child's toy. A small stuffed rabbit, its fur, matted and eyes missing. The man stared at it, confused, then horrified. It didn't belong to him. No child had ever been near that cabin, and nothing like that had been there when he arrived. As he lifted it, he noticed something else underneath, a piece of paper, crumpled and half frozen. Unfolding it with shaking hands, he found words, scrawled in faded pencil. He waits where the fire fades. That night, the fire was kept large and alive, brighter than ever before. No chance was taken. Every log burned hot. Every spark was watched. But around midnight, something strange happened. No wind outside, no sound from the trees, just stillness. And then the fire dimmed. Not slowly, but all at once, like someone had smothered it. The flames didn't go out completely, but they flickered low, weak, even though fresh wood had just been added. The man stood frozen, staring at it. Then he heard a soft knock, 3 gentle taps on the back door. The door no one ever used. The one that had always been locked and half buried in snow. The knock came again. 3 soft, measured taps. Not rushed. Not frantic. Calm. Like someone knew he was listening. Like someone had been waiting. He moved toward the back of the cabin, flashlight shaking in his grip. The knocking stopped. When he reached the door, heart pounding, he found it still locked. But there, in the frost on the glass, a handprint had appeared. A small one, child-sized, pressed against the window like it had been watching him for hours. The cold from that single print seemed to seep into the room, into his skin. Something had come closer, and it no longer felt like it was playing. It felt like it wanted in. That night felt longer than all the others combined. After the handprint appeared, nothing else happened for hours, but the silence itself became unbearable. Every creak of the wooden floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, sounded too deliberate. The man stayed close to the fire, feeding it constantly, never letting the flames fall too low. The memory of the note, "He waits where the fire fades," echoed in his mind like a warning not yet finished. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, creeping along the cabin walls as if reaching for him. The flashlight's beam had started to flicker, the batteries weakening despite being new. That flicker made the darkness seem more alive, like it was moving in between the flashes. Somewhere in the distance, a sound carried through the trees. Laughter. Faint, childlike, but not joyful, more like something imitating a child. The kind of laughter that didn't belong to a person, but to something that had only seen humans and was now pretending to be one. It came and went like a breeze, and then the wind howled louder than ever, shaking the entire cabin. Windows rattled, walls groaned, and the back door thudded once, just once, like something had thrown its weight against it. Not hard enough to break in, just enough to remind him it was still there, watching, testing. Around 3 a.m, the fire flickered, dangerously low. Despite his efforts, it seemed to struggle to stay alive. Every log burned too quickly, every ember dimmed too soon. As the flames weakened, the cold rushed in faster than before. And then the breathing returned, this time, not from a corner. It came from directly behind him, slow, steady, and so close that it felt like someone could be standing just inches away. He turned sharply, flashlight trembling in his grip, but no one was there. The shadows danced, the cabin groaned, but no figure revealed itself. Only that sound remained, and then faded just as suddenly as it had come. Heart pounding, hands frozen with fear, he backed against the stone of the fireplace, eyes darting to every corner of the cabin. Then, as the last log began to collapse into embers, the bell outside rang again. Not once. This time, it rang 5 times. Slow, spaced, like a countdown. Each ring echoed deeper, vibrating through the floorboards. The sound didn't fade like normal. It seemed to linger, as if it were inside the walls now, bouncing around the room. At the final ring, something heavy landed on the roof. Not snow. Not a branch. Something that stepped. One step, then another. Slow, steady, deliberate. Like it knew exactly where to walk to be heard. The man stood frozen, staring upward, while the roof creaked under the unseen weight. And then, just above, the fireplace, a single small knock tapped from the ceiling. Whatever it wasn't outside anymore. The knock on the ceiling echoed like a heartbeat, sharp and cold, cutting through the silence that had swallowed the cabin. The man didn't move. He barely breathed. Above him, something shifted, soft, like fabric brushing wood, or fingers, trailing across old beams. The fire had nearly died, reduced to faint orange embers that barely held off the darkness. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, not like natural cold, but the kind that seeped straight into bone. The flashlight had died completely. Only the pale light from the dying fire gave shape to the room now, flickering across the walls in trembling shadows. Then came the sound of crawling, slow and careful, something dragging itself along the ceiling. It moved from above the fireplace toward the center of the room, then directly over where he stood. The weight pressed down on the wood as if testing it. Then silence again. That stillness, worse than any sound, pressed in like a scream waiting to happen. A sudden burst of cold air rushed down the chimney, scattering ash across the floor. That was when a voice spoke. Not loud, but directly, in his ear. A whisper, soft and childlike. "Don't let the fire die." Spinning in place, he found nothing. No movement, no shadow. But the voice had been real. The weight on the roof vanished. No more creaks, no more footsteps. The cabin felt hollow, but something had changed. A sense of pressure lifted, just a little. With shaking hands, he forced the fire back to life, feeding it with every scrap of burnable material he could find. Broken chairs, old wooden planks, even the table. The flames rose again, casting back the darkness. As they grew, a figure became visible just outside the window. It stood still, just past the frost-covered glass. Not a child, not fully human. Tall, thin, and draped in something that looked like torn winter clothes. Its head tilted slightly, and though its face was hidden in shadow, the outline of a smile stretched too wide, too still. It didn't move, just watched. And then, as the fire blazed brighter, it began to fade. Not by stepping away, but as if the very air around it dissolved it, like smoke caught in wind. By dawn, the figure was gone. The snow had stopped completely. Sunlight glowed through the trees. He stepped outside, half afraid, half relieved. The world was silent and untouched. No tracks, no bell on the porch anymore, no sign that anything had been there at all. Just a single object rested at the doorstep. The same stuffed rabbit, now dry and clean, with a new note pinned to its chest. 4 words, written neatly in red ink. "He sleeps for now." He didn't stay another day, packed everything, and hiked out before noon. Told no one what happened, only that he wouldn't return. The cabin still stands, buried deep in the woods, waiting for the fire to fade again, waiting for the next visitor,